Hey everyone, today I'm going to be presenting my project on the music of Meshuggah. Meshuggah is an extreme experimental metal band that has influences from thrash metal, groove metal, and are really defined by their extensive use of polyrhythms and polymeters. So the reason I wanted to do my project on Meshuggah's music is because they use rhythm in a way that I had never come across before I ran into their music. Of course, this is really interesting to me as a drummer, and I hope that I can convey how interesting their music is rhythmically, even though some of you guys might not think that such an extreme genre is very appealing musically. So my goal with this project is to show you guys the Meshuggah sound, how they use rhythm, and of course I'm going to focus on the work of their drummer, Tomas Hake. Before I get into Meshuggah's music, or the drumming specifically, I wanted to give a little bit of background on the band. So Meshuggah comes from the town of Umeå in northern Sweden. I did my best to pronounce that. And they've been around since 1987, although I would argue that the sound that they're known for today really started to take shape in the mid to late 90s, which is also the point in their career when they started to gain more traction in the North American metal scene and tour with bigger bands from America like Slayer. So to date, they have released 8 studio albums, the most recent one being 2016's The Violent Sleep of Reason. And over their 34-year career, they've made quite a name for themselves in the metal scene, even being credited with the creation of a metal subgenre, which is known as gent. So as I said before, in this project I'll be focusing more specifically on the drummer, Tomas Hake. Tomas was not the original drummer of the band. He joined in 1990, 3 years after their formation. However, he was part of the band during the crucial years when they started to form that rhythmic sound that they're really known for today. So he's definitely an important figure in the band. In his career in Meshuggah, he has become a legend in the metal drumming scene, who is especially well known for his tight playing, technical style, and his ability to keep a solid groove above it all. I came across Meshuggah for the first time in a metal compilation video that just had a short live clip of them playing their song Bleed. I had never heard anything like this in the metal genre before. So what I didn't know at the time when I saw this video is that Bleed was their most popular song, and this was for a few reasons. The first being, of course, that it's got a unique sounding riff with that nice string bend. It just sounds great. The second reason that this song was so popular is that the drumming for this track is insane. Tomas syncs up with the guitars the whole time with his feet, so he plays that rhythm on his kick pedals, and if that isn't complex enough, he keeps a 4/4 groove with his hands. It's just incredible. So as interesting as this song was, it did get a little repetitive after hearing it a few times, so I decided to start looking more into their music, and where I really got hooked was with their song New Millennium Cyanide Christ. So with this song, I got a much better idea of how Meshuggah uses rhythm, which I'll show you later. And on top of that, the song itself is really groovy and it has a really good breakdown, which for any metal fan, that's just a huge bonus for any song. So it was after this that I really started to look into their music more and found a lot of great tracks like Rational Gaze, Demiurge, Corridor of Chameleons, concatenation. Soon enough, I was fully immersed in the world of Meshuggah. So after listening to several Meshuggah songs and even trying to play some on the drums myself, I started to notice a theme in their playing, which was also verified to me after watching a couple interviews with the band members. What I'm alluding to is the use of odd-numbered patterns in their riffs. These patterns can start to sound like different time signatures in the way that the band members play them. However, as they've said in many interviews, all of their music, with the exception of a couple riffs here and there in different albums, is written in 4/4. The way that they achieve this illusion of an odd time signature is they'll make an odd pattern in a riff and then they'll loop it over several measures in 4/4. So what you have often is sort of a clouded downbeat. It's sort of hard to find the 4/4 rhythm amongst the weird patterns. So you either get the impression of an odd time signature, or if you listen to the song enough and are able to keep the 4/4 rhythm going in your head, then you have a new riff essentially in every bar. As Tomas describes it,
programming it. Because a lot of the times with one of those things that's inherent in our music, a lot of times it's you have a 4/4 like a straight beat going, but then you kind of do odd cycles that kind of travel over the bar line and things like that.
As I go more into the presentation, I'll show you a visual representation of this to hopefully make it less confusing than it sounds. So now to talk a little bit about the instruments individually. For the guitars, they play in very low tuning, which is kind of a characteristic of a lot of different metal genres. For Meshuggah in particular, since their music is so anchored around rhythm, I find that melody seems to become kind of a secondary thought. The tonality, when it comes to riffs, isn't such a prominent part of the music. However, in the solos, which are very high-pitched and often dissonant and psychedelic sounding, tonality starts to become more important. The vocals are very raw and harsh and are either yelled or sometimes they're whispered, but it always gives off a very aggressive aura. So now to move on to the drums, which obviously is the focus here. Tomas plays in a very heavy and hard-hitting style, which is essential to the aggressive metal sound of the band. However, he also has a lot of versatility when it comes to staying in the pocket or adding fills to complement his grooves. Tomas also adds a dynamic layer to his playing by adding in lots of ghost notes and throwing in cymbal accents to complement the patterns that he plays. He also uses his hi-hats a lot, clapping them with one foot if the patterns played on the guitars don't demand that he use both feet on the kicks. A lot of these different aspects, keeping the hi-hat steady behind the groove and adding in a lot of ghost notes, has been attributed to jazz influence in his drumming. For the actual drum parts, Tomas often mirrors the patterns that are played on the guitars using his feet and keeps a steady 4/4 with the cymbal on all 4 and the snare on 3, as you saw in the Bleed clip. Sometimes the way he plays to complement these patterns involves the snare falling in line with the pattern and sometimes the cymbal as well. And this is where the downbeat starts to get a little fuzzy. Sometimes he'll take the groove to the toms and the kick, and this is a similar story. He'll either keep the toms in a nice steady 4/4, which makes it easier to tell where the downbeat is, or he'll use the toms and the kick to accent the pattern more, which makes the downbeat harder to discern. He also sometimes uses the toms and the kick as a sort of breakdown in either softer parts of the song or parts that are leading up to a sort of a climax. So although these beats are among the most common ones that Tomas uses, there are lots of different techniques and rhythmic flares that he uses to enhance the patterns of the riffs as he plays them on the drum set. Among all of the descriptions here of the techniques and rhythms and whatnot. What's most important for you to gain from this is the rhythmic complexity and the really unique sound that comes as a result of the offbeat patterns that he filters through his drum set and the way in which he does so. So next, as I look at some of the individual songs in a little more detail, I'll be showing you first just the basic way in which he lays down the patterns in different songs on the kit, and then the way in which he uses techniques and rhythmic flavors to make each pattern a little more interesting as he puts them out on the kit. So before I look at these songs, I just want to quickly introduce you to what I'll be calling the Meshuggah grid, which is where I'll be placing each of the songs after I've analyzed them. The Meshuggah grid is meant to show how complex the songs are from both a listening and a playing perspective. So the difficulty of the groove levels will be determined by how easily the downbeat can be kept by the listener, whereas the pattern difficulty levels will be determined by the complexity of the pattern from a rhythmic perspective.
The first song I'm going to be looking at is Bleed. If you remember, Bleed was the first song that I looked at in this presentation. Here, I'm just going to be analyzing the first riff of the song. The first riff in Bleed utilizes a hybrid rudiment called the herda, which is notated like this. The riff is simply a loop of this rudiment in a 4/4 meter. For context, if I were to place the herda in a triplet groove, it would fit nicely in the bar line, and it would sound like this. However, Meshuggah uses this rudiment in straight feel, in which the herda only falls on the downbeat 1 in every 3 measures. To have the full drum pattern, we just have to add a cymbal on every quarter note and a snare on every third quarter note on top of this kick pattern. Because this pattern is pretty simple and the snare and cymbal are there to guide us for keeping the downbeat, I'm going to put Bleed in the easy groove, easy pattern section of the grid.